Well, it kind of feels like 2022 came and went very quickly. It's like you blink and all of a sudden it's over. And next thing you know, you're reflecting back and saying, what did we do the last 12 months, especially in our this common hobby toy space that we happen to have here. Now, for all the exclusives and all the like retail items that we saw, right down to the peg warmers and even fan-made figures that started shipping out this year, you look back and you're kind of like, there is so much happening right now. It's hard to take it all in. Now, in terms of what we're seeing at big box stores and like the big retail items, some of the stuff from the bigger companies, it's hard not to notice and hard to look away from the fact that the prices just keep going up. And no matter what part of the world you're in, it's like, figures were $19.99 in the US, then they were 21, and they were 24, then 26, 29. We don't know where the price hike is going to stop. And it just begs the question, look, a lot of people, and I won't speak for everybody, and there is a multitude of reasons, but a lot of people got into modern toys knowing that the vintage stuff is quite expensive and a bit hard to get. Now you're in a time where distribution is, I'm not going to say bad, but I will say it's inconsistent. And I don't think that's disputable by much. Yes, you have your peg warmers you can always get. Yes, you have stuff that goes in large quantities to your sort of fan, what's the word? Fan shops, like the big ones, Big Bad Toy Store, Entertainment, or Fan Channel. That's the word I'm looking for. And then you've got ones that like they sell out for in 2 minutes on Hasbro Pulse. But either way, look, we're going to get into this discussion with a number of friends. So I'll start by welcoming everybody to the last Toy Connections online, or TKO, stream of 2022, and we roll into 2023. We'll say hi to the chat in a moment, but first, let's bring a couple of our friends backstage on camera, beginning with an individual who is actually the most recent channel member we have for Toy Connections, who's also got his own YouTube channel. We met on Mega J's channel a couple of months back. So welcome for the first time to TKO, Ozstradamus Toyz. How are you?
What's going on, everybody? And good morning for those of you on the West Coast.
Thank you very much. And, your microphone sounds great. I hope everyone else in the chat can. I know you said you just got a new one, so I like the sound of it. Let's put it that way. And I've also invited, actually, I think this might have been the first person to ever do a stream with me, but he's got an amazing customizing and sort of like repair channel. You can describe yourself when you're on camera. Why am I talking for you? Adam from GoFigure, welcome back, my friend.
Hey, Ken, it's good to be here. Oz, it's nice to be here with you. This is going to be a fun way to spend New Year's Eve day.
Absolutely. And thanks. I know you both got plans a little bit later on today, and technically so do I, but you know how it is. Like if there's time to weasel in and squeeze time for toys, we'll do that. Right.
Exactly.
Adam, it was what, just over a year ago, I couldn't even get Skype up and running, and we were trying to do a recording. And I'm kind of like, I don't know that I could do this recording thing. I should just stick to my uploads. And here we are just over a year later. And I'm like, hurry up and get on StreamYard. So
I feel like once you started streaming, you haven't really stopped. You just leave the room and come back when it's time to start a new stream.
And that's what I forgot to bring down. I was going to bring down my Kendar figure that you gifted me on Streamathon, because it's got the sword with the iPhone. I'm not even an iPhone user, but it's got a sword with an iPhone on it, like a custom. I think, Oz, you probably saw it on the Streamathon. I was supposed to bring that down. I knew I forgot something before I started the stream. But I've made that into a custom emoji for Toy Connections for the channel members, and it will make its way onto some videos at some point in time. I just have to figure out the best way to kind of, I could do a thank you, this is a great figure thing, or I could just have him just cameo and troll some of my Transformers and be like, hey, get off the set, Well, pleasure to have you both here. I'm just going to say a quick hello to everyone who happens to be in the chat. We've got Nolan. We've got Quip. Collecting Classics, I saw you last night on Mega J's channel. It's funny, like I was on his channel last week. You were there last night, and we were talking about streaming something together recently, and we could have done that last night, and we missed each other just by a little bit. But Happy New Year to you. Scuba Pete, good to see you always, my friend. We got Dale Santa Ford. We've got Enrique AE. We've got GoFigure pulling double duty in the chat and in the stream itself. We got Mutron, almost said Mouton, like the Action Force figure. We got the Duchess of Darkness, whose stuff I listen to till I get scared, which about because what is it? Oz. It's the horror stories a lot of the time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. She
Yeah.
does Wicked Wednesday every Wednesday, where she does a premiere video with several recorded stories. As a matter of fact, just as we're going live, I got the notification she has just posted a new video to her channel. So
All right.
after
Will
this,
I be
hop
able
on
to
over
sleep
there.
at night if because I have listened to parts of stories here and there, then I go, it's too late at night. Maybe I won't do this. But hopefully, anyway,
Hey,
I'm a scaredy cat.
If you listen to it and you can't sleep, just jump on and stream a bit, you know?
Okay, duly noted. All right. We got Ian Sweeney as well. We got Danjamin905. Well, busy chat today. Everyone's kind of like everyone happened to make it here on New Year's Eve. I wasn't sure. Wow. Gentlemen, as we jump into the topic of the closing gap in prices between vintage and modern, and the fact that vintage was always hard to get because if you went to a local shop, they'd have maybe one of that figure and another customer would get it before you, or a good deal at a toy show that the guy first in line gets it, or another vendor if they're done setting up early. Adam knows what I'm talking about. And now stuff's getting harder to get, even in the modern space, and prices are going up. How do we feel about all this? Is it just time to turn the blinders blinders on, eyes off, and go back to vintage? Oz, let's collect your thoughts on this.
Well, you know, part of the reason that I was so into getting back started into toy collecting, getting into Origins, was that price point. You know, when it first started showing up on shelves, it was $15 a figure, where most of the other figures I was looking at were 20 and up. So it was like, you know what, at $15 a figure, and it's one of those lines that I absolutely love. They're paying complete homage to the original line. It was great. And I always tell the story of my son, who a couple of years ago, we started watching the cartoon together, and I was talking about how I had toys of it when I was a kid. He was like, oh man, Dad, I would love to have some toys of He-Man. And I went looking at those vintage prices online. And I said, you know what, buddy? Daddy would too. Because it was just kind of unobtainable. Like, yeah, you can get some of like the characters that were a little less loved reasonably, but for the most part, they were far too expensive to get into. So this was great. But now, as prices keep hiking up a little bit more and more, you start looking at the fact of, well, I don't know. Maybe vintage, as the price has come down a bit on those, might be interesting to just go back and get some more of those figures. Thank you, Scuba Pete.
Absolutely. And Scuba Pete and Gazz are like they work so hard to make sure all the links are. I usually put them in the description anyway, but depending on the device you're watching, you might not be able to access the description. So Gazz and Scuba Pete all throughout the year have been really good at like putting links in here, and Zazel too, if he's up, but it's kind of a weird hour of the day. And Ryan Sweeney and Jody, when they're on, are great moderators as well. So as it's the end of the year, I get to shout out my helpful moderators as well. Oz, I've noticed the same thing in terms of a character like Manny Faces, who's about $15 anyway, even in the vintage line. It doesn't make a huge difference. But when things like Origins started giving us characters like Wundar, Sunman, in fact, those are the first two Origins characters I got because you couldn't get them in the vintage line. And of course, I got them after Adam gave me gifted me the Kendar figure, because you've now started that scale of Motu for me that I was mostly into the. You can see it down here. You can see some of the classic stuff. Collecting classics, Ray, you'll appreciate this, right? And then I've got the Revelation Sunman, or the Masterverse Sunman right there. That was a scale I wanted to get into, but anyway, just getting back to my thoughts there, like. There's, if they ever make like a laser power He-Man or a laser light Skeletor, you're going to want that in Origins because you can play with it. If you get the vintage one, it goes in a case, you just walk away from it, right? So, yeah. Adam, I know you're a big vintage guy.
Yeah, so I have a different narrative than you guys do, a different experience. So, and maybe it's due to the fact that my channel and my collecting has always been one of restoration and reconciliation. And so, you know, for me to buy a bin of old Motu guys for $30 and have them as beaters that we fix up and get them looking good on the shelf, that's way cheaper than any modern figure would be. So I personally haven't found the price point to be a deterrent from collecting vintage ever. I think it's always been cheaper in my mind to collect vintage, and also because if we take He-Man as a one-to-one example, you guys mentioned He-Man. I'm a big He-Man fan. So we have 5 He-Mans that exist in the vintage line, right? We have like power harness, we'll call them, battle armor, thunder punch, flying fists, and then the laser light one that I sort of count, but not really. And so let's say on an average, let's take laser light out of the situation because to me he's not nostalgic because I never had him as a kid anyways. But let's just take those first.
Well, he does have the Dolph head, doesn't he? Generally speaking, like he has a more Dolph style head.
Yeah, he has 2 heads that you can get, but like he was released in Europe. So like I have no desire to have him in my collections. I have no emotional connection to him, and I think he's kind of a janky figure to begin. But anyways, that being said, let's say those 4 on average, and some are more expensive, but let's say like loose, incomplete, on average, they're about, you know, say $20 a figure to get those 4. So let's just say that they're in good shape and you know, sort of not complete. They got some accessories. So say $20 a figure. So now we're at $80, and we have the 4 He-Man that are like quintessential and, you know, iconic to who we are. So maybe 1 for 1 to get 4 modern figures, we're looking at about the same, but that's not where it stops. So if you look at, we'll take the Motu Classics, that line, as a starting point for modern He-Man collecting. So I know there is the commemorative one, and there's a 2000X series, but let's say like adult collecting, us guys focused, it was the classics, right? So it was the Motu Classics. So that line, just speaking of He-Man, just He-Man himself, I think it had like 17 or 18 different versions of He-Man to get in that line. So now we've gone from having the complete collection of our quintessential He-Man figures to now we need to spend, at that time, what were they, Ken? Were you in it when you were subscription
Classics?
Days? Yeah.
No, but the people who were in it, like Western Fandom Power or the 2 guys from Geek Dad Life there, they said it was about $20 a figure.
Okay, so that's
US back then. Now,
okay,
mind you, you also had to buy full waves. You couldn't just pick and choose. I think if someone collecting classics, Ray will be able to confirm that in the chat if he's still watching.
But let's say it's $20, just to pick a number.
It is that price, but yeah. Anyway,
and let's say, like we said, the average price of those 4 vintage He-Man figures was $20 a piece. So we're at $80 for our quintessential. But now there's like 17 He-Man figures in classics that are $20 a piece. So already to kind of complete that line that isn't even going to hit our nostalgic button as much as the vintage one was, we're at way more than $80. But let's say we do that and we're happy. And even Scott Knight, who is the brand manager, said he wanted to create like quintessential ultimate version of He-Man, right? That's what. So let's take the first issue, first figure He-Man figure. That was the 1-to-1 of reissue of the classic one. So we have that. So let's say we buy into that the classics is the ultimate version of He-Man. We've done that. And we spent our more than $80 to get them. And now we're content. But then Origins comes out and you're like, oh man, now I like Origins, like you said, it's a throwback. It's like a direct throwback to the nostalgia one. The packaging's good. You go out there, you're like, you know what? This one works. I'm going to buy this. I'll pay $15 for it. And you take it home. You know what? I don't really like that head. The head's it's a bit off. So then Mattel, trying to be our friend or whatever, a year later releases it with a different head. So now I got to buy a second one. And so now I'm at $30 to try and capture the feeling I had for that original vintage one, which still is off a little bit. Then we say, okay, but we have our vintage reissue one, Origins with the new head, that's fine. We have our classics one. We have the ultimate versions of He-Man. Then Masterverse comes out. Now, like or dislike what happened with the Revelation He-Man, there was like a new articulation, a new body style. People bought that, complained about it. And then the 40th anniversary comes out. And then New Eternia comes out. And so collecting modern is infinitely more expensive than collecting vintage, because collecting vintage, you have your 4 He-Man figures and you're good to go.
Wow. Okay. Mind blown, because you're right. I was thinking if you're collecting one for one, Origins He-Man versus trying to get the original He-Man, it's not one for one. But does modern, like, look, Sunman, a lot of people don't have attachment to him. I like what he represents, not just for minorities, but the fact that there's another part of the lore over on another part of the world. It's what I liked about it. But you're right. I never even thought to approach the idea of the idea that you're collecting more because they're filling so many extra gaps and they're trying to squeeze that extra dollar. Like, oh, we know we can get collectors, so let's release another version. What you said about the He-Man head, this happens in so many toy lines. Like, you know how they release the kind of like the goofy looking He-Man head, then they release the more vintage looking one. How many times, you Transformers collectors in the chat know, how many times have we gotten a Starscream and then we get an anime accurate Starscream, and then we get one with the coronation gear? All of a sudden you can kind of see the cape right there at the bottom, even if you can't see the crown. They just keep getting you. Whereas in the vintage line, they were just making the characters match the cartoon, and that was it. So maybe you're right. Like, maybe there's certain things, like maybe you pay $75 for a vintage He-Man, but you're buying him, you're buying the other three. If you have to get a Holy Grail, you get the laser lights, which will blow the budget out of the water anyway. But if you're just getting those four compared to the however many umpteen you got to get in classics,
is it blowing the budget out of the water?
Laser lights, laser light He-Man.
Yeah. So
laser power He-Man.
Laser power He-Man. What's he go for?
Is he not well into the 4 digits? Is he not well over?
Let's say he's $1,000. Let's say he's $1,000. If you're getting all the classics He-Mans, you're kind of there.
Now you're right. Now you are. Sorry, you're right. If I was thinking the $20 price point in the past, but you're right. I can't do that. If you wanted to get it now, you're right. Damn. So do you do that, or do you just go and get Laser Light He-Man, Laser Power Skeletor? I might be mixing up the two. Titus and Megator.
The big part of that conversation comes into: are you a completist, or are you just going for the ones that you would have, like Adam said, that nostalgia factor to? Laser Light doesn't mean a whole lot to me. He was European release, never saw him, had no idea about him until years later when I got into collecting. And even then, I was just kind of like, he's kind of big, bulky, and a little dopey looking. And I didn't have as much interest in that figure. And trying to bring him up now, and of course, the only thing that comes up is the classics version of him. Well, here's one actually, a vintage Laser Light Power, Spain, Italy, He-Man, Masters of the Universe, and he's got the more vintage style looking head. For that one figure alone, you are looking at $750 on eBay right
and it's
now.
It's not complete, right?
Not even close to complete.
Right. I've always, I mean, maybe the two of you know this better, but I've always kind of like, I almost messaged you folks ahead of time because I know you're both He-Man guys more than I am. I always thought that like the top 5 He-Man figures in terms of rarity, price, etc., were always Titus, Megator, Laser He-Man, Laser Skeletor, Wundar, right? We're always kind of like the main, like, I mean, yeah, we're talking general, like all things equal, not like, oh, but if you have a sealed so-and-so rare, foreign version of another. Anyway.
But it goes to like the weird grail conundrum, which is the rare figures are the ones that nobody had. So you're not trying to get stuff you had as a kid anymore. You're trying to just either be a completist or like lord it over the other collectors. Like, hey, I got this and you don't have it, which I don't think is a healthy attitude to have anyways. No. Right? Like all I want is for all my buddies to kind of like enjoy this as well. So you mentioned my buddy Taverko, like him and I, we get together every Thursday because our kids do karate together. And we just like chat toys and whatnot. And like, we'll pick stuff up and be like, hey, I got this. You can put it in your collection. He's like, hey, I got this in your collection. Because it's not like we're trying to compete with each other. We just want to enjoy the hobby like when we were kids.
Right.
It brings up another thing too, because I know a few G.I. Joe collectors and a few Transformers collectors, they used to lord things over me. And it would literally be like, look what I got, huh? I got this, you know what it's worth? This exclusive thing. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, can we just jump to the conclusion? My collection sucks and you own a Rolex. And can we just get back to the love of the toys? And when I took that attitude, people were like, no, but I'm like, you see, now I know why you bought it, right? It's unfortunate that some people collect that way, but to your point, Adam, it became a status thing for some people, and I'm like, if I get a rare item, I don't know if either of you have seen. I know some people in the chat have seen my Diaclone Battle Convoy video, the precursor to Optimus Prime.
Right.
That's rare. That's expensive. I've got 2 of the 3 Diaclone drivers that are hard to find now. I didn't when I first got it. That figure is special to me. I don't care that it's worth in the 4 digits. In fact, I just did a countdown list that I'll release in February sometime. And one of the things I say is I didn't look up the recent market value for this after I got it again, because it's not about the price on that one. It happens to be expensive, but I'll tell you this, what it represents in the precursor and what it fed into for 40 years of Transformers after the fact. That's why that item is special to me. And the fact that I could have gotten one for less price back in 2003, but I was a university student.
Oh,
right.
I mean,
so there's a specialty.
But you can't think. If I would have known what He-Man was worth, I would have bought them all in the 90s. This is the world we're living in right now, and if you're not getting joy from collecting how you're collecting, then don't do, like, it's when, like, so take Wondar for example, and you say it's hard to find like a vintage toy sometimes, they're not really available. So that thing sold out when Mattel Creations did it in like 30 seconds, right? Like it's there and it's gone. And then everybody just complained about it online. They were just like, "Oh, I didn't get it," and then you get 50 channels doing a review of the figure. They're like, "Yeah, it's pretty good. Like it is what it is." And I saw that figure not bring a whole lot of people joy. I saw that figure bring a lot of people like frustration, confusion, and a critical attitude. And to me, that's maybe what toys are about. And so if your collecting is making you have rants on the internet, well, maybe just reevaluate what we're doing.
That's a good point. And in regards to Wondar, I would have had no attachment, but more than 10 years ago on Toy Hunter, Jordan is looking through a stash of stuff. And then he goes, and they cut to commercial break, and he pulls out a figure I'd never heard of, and he calls it the Wonder Bread He-Man. And I'm like, that's cool, right? And then I look at the story behind it, the fact that it was a buy 3, get 1 promotion, the fact that there was all this stuff about Wonder Bread that didn't end up being true, the fact that the Classics one released him with a loaf of Wonder Bread, and the fact that he looks a little bit like Conan. All of that fed into me wanting a Classics Wonder Bread He-Man and an Origins Wonder Bread He-Man. Now, whether that means I'll go down and track down a vintage one, I've considered it, but it's a maybe. And I know Adam did a video on a custom Wonder Bread He-Man.
Yeah, so like,
did you just go to grab it?
Yeah, I really think Wonder Bread He-Man's a cool guy. So I made this one, and it cost me like $6. And I even like made his armor on the Cricket. And so this brings me more joy than spending $5,000 on one, because I have it in my collection. I had to make it, and that was a fun project. And you get to have them, but that brings me joy. Spending $4,000 would not bring me or my marriage joy.
Well, my thought on that would be more like, I don't mind spending if I don't have something else to buy, but at the same time, what if the leg bands break? I know you know how to fix them with the O-rings and all that, but I'm not you.
There is a breaking point where, like, this is just a small piece of plastic, right? And it's worth money to a very small community. So is the value actually there?
That's fair. That's a great question. And Scuba Pete brings up here, he saw a Wonder Bread at Kokomo Toys for $800 and happily picked up the Origins version. That's $800 US. What's that? $1,100 for us here in Canada?
Yeah.
Right.
But again, Scuba Pete, man, if you picked up your Origins version and love it, I love that. That's amazing. Like that, I think that we should be free to buy the toys that bring us joy. But if the price point and if the competition, if the community that we're in isn't doing that, then we need to reevaluate. And we also have to ask ourselves, like, why we're collecting. So the question you ask, Ken, is like, do you go to vintage now because modern is too expensive? And I think, well, that asks actually a very interesting question, which is, why are you collecting? Are you collecting because you want to acquire things? Are you collecting because you have an inherent need to buy things? Or are you collecting things that you would want? So I would rather not buy anything for a month and then buy some vintage toys that I want than buy certain, action figures every month that kind of keep feeding that need.
Sure. I agree with that. It's one of those things like, are you good with holding off? Like, what is your need? What are your motives behind your collection is really what it really just boils down to. And like I said, that moment for me with my son talking about, I'd love to have some He-Man toys to play with him, and looking at that price, I couldn't go that route at the time. Yeah. Now it's easily more readily affordable to buy these new Origins. But maybe if I was in the same case as Adam, where I had the ability and the knowledge to fix up vintage ones, because you can buy tons of them in a lot if they're not complete, broken, or in pretty bad shape. So if I had the knowledge and the know how to fix those, that would be significantly cheaper, and I'd be all about doing that more so than trying to keep up with the latest releases or finding what's at the store. It's a lot more difficult. But then you get into some other brands and you look at stuff like, again, we were talking Transformers. Some of those G1 Transformers, the price for those complete. And then now that comes back into today's conversation where you can get versions of those G1 Transformers, but is it more worth it to get that vintage one compared to going out to the store and buying, what was it, Walmart had Optimus in the retro packaging like a year or 2 years ago?
Yep.
With no trailer, but
right, no trailer, just the bot. Trailer comes separately these days, folks. We all seen that with the Roboson
self-transforming.
But what's the route you want to go with that? Do you want to try to hunt down maybe a broken Transformer? Because I'm sure that, Adam, I don't know if you fix Transformers. I'm sure the engineering on those might be a little
You've done a bit.
difficult.
You've done like an Ultra Magnus and all that recently. Yeah. That was a great point. Oz. Yeah. Good.
And I think it comes down to, do you want a Optimus Prime to put on your desk and to put on your shelf, or do you want to have all of the Optimus Primes? Like, can you be happy with one, or do you need to keep buying the new ones, the latest ones that are coming out? And so that was what stopped me from collecting modern. And it was about eight years ago. I was coming at the store with a Batman versus Superman figure. And I was like, I paid $24 for it or whatever. I was like, I don't like this figure or this movie. Why did I buy this? Like, why did I buy it?
Oh, that
funny. Sounds like a FOMO situation more than anything else.
But I was buying, I love Superman. And so I asked myself, I was like, why am I buying the Superman? Like, what? And it's because I love the 1984 Kenner's Superpower Superman. And I was like, every figure I'm buying is trying to get me to be as like joy-filled as I was the day I got my Superpowers figure when I was a kid. And I was like, but I have that figure. I have him in my shelf, my other Superpowers. I don't actually, my Superman cup is full. Everything else is just overflowing me trying to acquire that. So I was like, I'm done. Like I had this lethargic moment where I bought a new figure and I was like, oh, I guess I'm not doing this anymore. And I'm just going to focus on vintage. Because again, it's not any more expensive in my mind. And because there's a finite end to it. And every vintage figure I get has a memory attached to it. And it's the ultimate, like if there's a needle that goes to what our mind thinks is the perfect version of it. And so let's just take Superman in the 84. So the 84 Superpowers is where my needle is, whether I know that subconsciously or not. It says if it's bigger and more detailed and it has better articulation, well, then it's going to say it's better. But actually, it's moving further away from what I actually think is the quintessential Superman. And you know what I mean? So it's like anything that differs from that Superpower Superman takes away from what I'm actually looking for. Point in fact, McFarlane released the Superpowers figures this year. He put them out. People went crazy for them. And honestly, it was cool to walk into a store and see those cards on the shelf. But I looked at the figure and I was like, no, it's not it's not the same sculpt. And he's got knee pegs. That doesn't look right. His cape is janky. and he has no superpower action. So it's so far actually away from what I'm trying to get, or what I desire is the perfect Superman figure, because I have it. And then you saw this weird thing. So I have a video where I redo superpowers capes. And so that video took a huge spike when these McFarlane comes out, because their capes are so bad. So guys are saying, like, if you buy this figure and then you get, these are the capes that I get from this guy in Utah, and he makes great capes, and you put it on there, it's pretty good. And I was like, well, why are we having to spend money and time on a figure that's pretty good with all this extra effort when we can just buy the original for around the same price, maybe a little more, and just have what we already, and to that point, people buying those superpowers figures already had the original. Like they already had it.
That's what it is because they have to chase that same nostalgia high. And in your case too, like your Superman is very much, we were talking last night, Christopher Reeves, and also you're a Super Friends guy. So like, if going back to what you said about BVS there, if you needed a Henry Cavill Superman, then you would need to get something modern, something not vintage. Right.
So you got to ask yourself, why do you need a Henry Cavill Superman?
It depends. If he happens to be your Superman, like I used to have one, I don't have one anymore, right?
No, but if you grew up, that's what you know Superman as. That go and get it. That's great. But we need. When I hear people say, "Well, I need it," we actually don't. Like I see great collections in everybody's background here. We don't need any of it. It's all extra. It's all gravy to the life that we have, and we're privileged to have it. But we don't need it. And we as collectors, sometimes we harness and we hang things on that word need, and we get in our own heads that like, oh, if I ever see the Dick Tracy blank for under $800, I'm going to buy it because I need that figure. You know what? Maybe I don't need that figure. Maybe I want it and I'm allowed to want it, but I don't need it. And there's a big difference in that. And I think that's a mentality we need to be okay with.
Okay. No, absolutely. Oz, did you want to add anything to that before I share a screen here?
Well, I was going to say, actually, if you pull up Brick's latest comment there, I think that's something that we should all take with us, is a little Adam perched on our shoulder every time we're about to make a purchase now. Do I really need this or not? And, honestly, we all need to have those kind of moments. Like, do we really need to have this? I know, again, big Origins collector, Space Sumo dropped.
Oh, gosh.
I was just kind of like, coming up to it, do I really need this figure? Do I even want this figure? I have the 3-pack. Do I want this single carded version? And the truth is, the only reason I could really see to buy it would be to get the mini comic and that full back art of the Space Sumo box, which I love the art of these figures and the boxes. But it was really just, I don't need this. I do not need this. Now I think he's still available at this point, actually. I think he is still up on Mattel Creations for anybody to purchase. And that's fine. Like, I don't need that. But we do have to come to those moments, especially when we're talking about, is it worth the cost? Because new figures are getting pricier, very pricey, especially if you go down the Hasbro hole. I have no idea what's going on in their heads right now.
we were in Toys R Us 2 days ago. My kids were spending some Christmas money, and my son
rub it in, Adam. Rub it in. Got a Toys R Us up there in your fancy Canada.
Yeah, but
I know what I'll do on New Year's Eve. I'll go to Toys R Us. Sorry, Oz.
My son got a Snake Eyes under the tree on Christmas morning. And he wanted to get it was from the classified, but the movie version. And he wanted to get a Storm Shadow to go with it. And I was like, all right. And we went there, and they're $44.
Yeah.
2 classified figures is $100.
After tax, yeah.
Give me vintage G.I. Joes you can buy for $100.
Right. Yeah. Even like, if you're looking for maybe like a Serpentor complete vintage, that might hit that $100 price range for a figure or whatever.
And you might get an air chariot with it.
You might. If it's complete, you'll get that air chariot. But, it's looking at these and thinking about buying that toy for your kid. Because, again, let's remember, these toys that they make are supposed to be for kids. But
Yes.
the companies have thrown that right out the window because they know kids today aren't really buying the toys. It's the adults. And that's where that whole other article thing comes
An NBC article, yep.
You know,
if you go to the toy store right now and we look at what's on the shelves, there's DC, Marvel, Power Rangers, Ghostbusters, He-Man, G.I. Joe, Transformers, wrestling. That's kind of it. That's
Jurassic Park.
Jurassic Park.
For now, because we just had the movie.
But
yes.
Those are all brands and IPs that we love. When we say that there's nothing, the kids aren't buying toys, is we're not making them for them. We make kid versions of these IPs, and sure, like kids love Marvel movies and everything, but we're not. The toy companies aren't trying anything. All the things that we love, Masters of the Universe. We're talking about Visionaries earlier. You know, we look at Thundercats. You know, I love Thundercats. G.I. Joe. All of those things were a risk that the toy company said, you know what, we're going to try this and see what happens. And it was a beautiful risk. It spurned everything. But no one's taken a risk in the last 15 years in a toy company.
Well, like kids are always on their devices, right? And it's funny. I was just before you jumped on earlier, I was looking at a Super 7 Thundercats Lion-O, like thinking, do I go down this rabbit hole? Because I see Lion-O, I'm going to want Mumra, then I'm going to want Tigra, then, you know.
Right.
All of a sudden we'll be like, well, Bengali's pretty cool and Jaga's pretty cool, and then Snarf, who's overpriced given the size of him.
And it'll never be this, Ken. Like, it'll never be as nostalgic as this.
Oh, yeah.
Right? As kind of like limited as he is and whatnot, you're never going to get to go like this with the action and have that feeling with a Super 7 $80 figure.
So, let's. You got their Cyclone Oz. Oh, with the so your spinning action, your spin action. Well, most people spin action. That one's not one of the ones that breaks easily, but yours spins very smoothly.
Yes. Yeah. And I got lucky. A friend of mine was moving, and he was like, just as I was really getting back into collecting the new Origins line, he said, I have all of these old vintage Masters of the Universe toys. Would you like to have them? So I inherited a whole giant box full of decent condition. Most of them actually have some of their weapons and stuff like that absolutely free because they were getting rid of them. So I really lucked out on this. And as a matter of fact, just for this episode, I dug the box up to bring up here because I don't have room to display everything. But
when we're done here, send me a message of the weapons that you need. I make a bunch of weapons, and I'll just send you some for you and your boy.
Oh,
there you go.
Awesome. Thank you.
He does. Yeah. He does a lot of his own out of his own 3D printer, and he's got a pretty good machine set up going there.
But yeah, when we talk about toys in the vintage versus the new, a lot of people, and I'll use this character as a very good example. Mechaneck. Yeah. You can't do this with the new Mechaneck. It's just the modularity now. Go ahead, guys.
No, it's fine. I was going to say, if either of you needs to share a screen, let me know.
Sure.
On this. Now, when we talk about vintage, right? Like, it seems like everyone here's got a story with how they got the figure, came in a box, restored, got a holy grail through a good friend or something along those lines. How did he smell?
Oh, he still has it. It's not as strong because this guy would stink up your toy box back in the day. You could smell him permeating from the package back in the day. Yeah. And 40 years later, he still smells like that uncle that wore the leisure suit and just showed up at your door.
I called my leisure suit Larry.
I wonder how many people will get that reference.
My brother played the game, and I was way too young to understand what was going on, but I understood what was going on. When it comes to vintage and like the nostalgia behind it, regardless of the value of the item, and I know at least one person in the chat has said, nice flexing your G1s, Ken, and I hope this doesn't come across the same way, but when it comes to like the story behind it, right? when I was a kid, like the loose defensor on the bottom there, that is my vintage one. I had that as a kid. I think I had to replace 2 of the limbs, or maybe I didn't have 2 of the limbs and I used like different bots, but the top half, the hotspot and the 2 arms I had. And those, it's a story to me that was the combiner I used the most as a kid, right? We all have a story. You're sharing your stories here. Come to find out later on, the gift set was short packed. The gift set behind the box was short packed and very hard to find. And it was to the point where the American box, like if you look closely on this box, let me try to zoom in, you'll notice that it's actually in the French Canadian packaging. I don't know how well that comes up on the screen, but you'll see that it's bilingual, right?
Yeah.
So what it is the story here is that the American version was quite short packed because Superion came out. Sorry, let me step back a year. Devastator sold out. Sorry, Devastator sold the year before. It sold really, really well. Superion came out in that gap in between to kind of transition 1986. And then he didn't sell well. So retailers ordered less of Defensor to the point that American box Defensors, just the gift box, even though the toy is the same on the inside, is extremely rare and extremely hard to find. A lot of American collectors started buying the Canadian box one or the Italian box one to try to fill that gap in their collection. We're talking the really high-end collectors. Recently, somebody found the really hard to find American box one. I said, do you want the Canadian box? I said, absolutely, I will take it. But when it comes to these kinds of collectibles, there's a story behind it, right? He was my combiner as a kid. I live in Canada. There's this whole backstory about how he was short packed due to the poor sales of the previous combiner. A lot of the high-end collectors don't even have an American one. I found someone who was willing to purge. This was basically this box. I always joke around that all my high-end stuff is the reject pile of the real high-end collectors. And this was sort of like his spare Defensor because he found a minty boxed American one that's worth like quadruple the price of this one. Because he has all the paperwork and a nicer box, and the American ones are the hardest to get. But like, you see how there's a connection, a toy connection behind the that's so lame. It means a second.
It's so good, man. Everybody's got to have those catchphrases, because some things are just too awesome to,
Yes.
Not
Go figure. It's just that awesome.
Oh, don't bring me into this.
Yeah, but like what I was trying to say there is like when you look at, I thought about this because I got this a couple of months back, knowing that a lot of I started looking at HasLab and Mattel Creations and all that. I'm like, man, this stuff's getting expensive, and I look like, well, why don't I just buy a vintage or something, right? And then it brought back a lot of memories of playing with Defensor with my cousin when he would bring all his mask toys over. And I would be like, okay, I'm going to crush your mask rhino by combining this bot, which isn't that big, by the way. You look at it there. So he wasn't as intimidated as I thought he would be when I came out with my Defensor as a kid. But it brought back a lot of memories. And having that box there was like, this is a toy store feel in the 80s, especially in Canada, which is why I was like, bring everything full circle here as far as like having the nostalgia drive behind what you're buying. Right. Yeah. And that the boxes up there displayed, that gives me so much more satisfaction than just chasing a whale every month to keep the fix
not
going.
Not on the spot here, but like Oz, you started collecting Origins when your son was like, "Hey, I want some." But did any Origins figure opening compare to that box of vintage ones you got from that guy?
Yes, absolutely did.
Okay.
I got this vintage box shortly after I started doing Origins. I received Origins from a buddy of mine who worked at Walmart at the time. I talk about him on my channel every now and again. He's my toy hunting buddy, Ziggy. And he, just a few weeks before I even knew like Origins was a thing, somehow we had brought up the topic of those 25th like anniversary figures that came out, or the 20th anniversary ones, where it was the vintage, the absolute vintage toy with the vintage box and then like the commemorative box around it.
Yeah. And
we were talking about that, and I was talking about how much I enjoyed Masters Universe. He sent me a picture one day of He-Man and Skeletor in his store at his Walmart.
Right.
Head sculpts were off, but they were that it was the box. I couldn't tell the articulation at the time.
Yep.
And I was just like, oh man, that is really awesome. So a couple weeks later, because it was right around this time of the year in 2020, he shows up and we go grab a cup of coffee. And while we're sitting in the car, he hands me these two things. And I looked at him and I knew exactly what it was because I could see it and I completely remembered what it was like being 5 years old and getting those on Christmas Day wrapped up in that feeling of opening them. And
I would say that the thing that Origins did the best was the packaging. Like they nailed that 100%.
Yes, absolutely. So that year I got, this is again some 30 years later after the first time I received He-Man and Skeletor for Christmas. I received He-Man and Skeletor for Christmas, and it just completely, more so than getting this box brought me a lot of joy, and I'm not going to pretend like it didn't because it's amazing. I've got Battle Cat, I've got Panther, Screech, Zor, like so many others in here, and figures I never had in my collection originally either. And it's incredible. But the feeling I got when I unwrapped He-Man and Skeletor that day, and then a few weeks later, couple of my other friends worked together and ended up getting me Battle Cat as well that year. It was just wow. And still, when I get my Origins figures, I feel that
it's all about that story. Screech and Zoar, Adam, we were just talking recently when for very cheap, like literally for $20 because it was a good deal. I got that. I remember, Adam, when I showed you the Big Jim version of the Eagle. Oz, you probably saw that on my Instagram, right? It was a $20 item. The claw is kind of busted, but the fact that that's what makes it a 1970s toy. And like it makes me appreciate Screech and Zoar all that much more. Right? And your wings still work. The one on my my Big Jim Eagle of Danger Peak doesn't work very well. Like it kind of moves a little bit. But yeah, look, and the story you just told us, very heartwarming, right? Now they did release He-Man and Battle Cat in its own gift box back in the day, didn't they?
They released He-Man and Battle Cat. They released Battle Armor He-Man and Battle Cat. And that was like in the early days of like a Zellers exclusive or a Kmart exclusive, where it would be like a 3-pack or a 2-pack. They did a lot of crazy stuff with the Motu line. It was all over.
That's something I'd love to get. It's like a box, even if it's like a kind of a beat up box, like how my Defensor box was not mint at all. I'd love to get one of those boxes and display like the vintage He-Man and the Battle Cat in there. Like that would just look great because it just creates that toy store feel, right? Yeah. What do you got there, Oz?
I forgot that was And Ken, I may have to just ship this guy up to you because I think you need a ref.
A ref for my wrestling rings.
Yep.
My wrestling stuff.
Just need referee Mario. Look at that stash.
That guy is jacked.
Right for a ref.
So I guess he's.
I was
gonna say he's no Earl Hebner. He's no Tim White.
Nope.
Right. Yeah.
I forgot what other stuff was in here too. I got a Rambo.
Force of Freedom stuff. Adam did a stream on Rambo a few months back, and you've done a few Rambo restorations.
Yeah, I love that line. It dovetails right to Sectars. It's beautiful.
Well, you told me to watch the first 3 or the first 4 Rambos, Adam. I managed to get through the first 3 like properly, like not staring up at it as a 6-year-old kid.
I love that. Like some of the greatest films of all time. Ken says I managed to get through them.
What do you mean? Sorry, say that again?
You just said you managed to get through the first 3 Rambo movies. It is a joy to get through the first 3 Rambo movies.
Yeah, the word choice on Oz, we'll flash that up in a second. But yeah, the word choice on managed to get through them. Enjoyably watch them in awe because of the story and Stallone's acting. And Colonel Sam Troutman is just so cool.
Yeah, and he's the best figure of the Coleco line.
All right, I need to see what you just held up there, Oz.
Vintage Scarecrow.
I know someone who might be able to make a cape and a halberd for you.
Ooh.
Yeah, I definitely have.
And speaking of movies, we just did the Megaforce watch party last night. I had to bow out about halfway through, but I have seen the ending of it on YouTube anyway, so I can safely say I've seen about 50 minutes to an hour of Megaforce now. So I'm allowed to do the Gazz. I know you're in the chat. I haven't said hi to you yet. I'll get to you in a second, Adam. This is the Ace Hunter thumb kiss for Gazz and chat and anyone else. And let's have a look. I'd like to have a look at the.
There's my custom halberd and cape.
And
they
see,
are gorgeous.
For photography reason, it just looks.
Yeah. I've also made up a glow in the dark halberd, so I can do both variants of them.
Nice. Yeah, I'd love to have a glow in the dark halberd. Oh man.
I've also, even because for a while I thought I'd never get one, a fully 3D printed Glow.
Oh,
wow.
Completely
Very
like
nice.
snapped together, 3D printed. Wow.
Yeah, fully articulated, ready to go.
So minty looking too. Wow.
I mean,
he glows so bright.
Yeah, never skimp on that glow powder.
No,
I'm
exactly.
sorry. I'm a sucker for glow in the dark. And, I just always thought those were some of the most fun toys ever as a kid.
Yeah, I just did a custom Skeletor armor where it was he imprisoned Scareglow in his armor was the story. So his armor has a skull and it's all glow in the dark. And that was like my biggest, I think, like feedback from people who were like, this is a Skeletor they should have made.
Yeah, definitely. That would have been really cool considering he's supposed to be the ghost of Skeletor. However you want to look at the wording.
I was going to say,
that,
if you look at Revelations, we now know more or less what Ghost of Skeletor means. I've always looked at him as a minion of Skeletor. Yeah.
All I want is more toys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's one thing I do like about having the modern is that we have possibilities and avenues for toys we didn't get in a vintage line. Because the one fallback of the vintage line, and again, it's not necessarily a fallback or downgrade. It's a vintage line's done. It's come out, it's run its course, and there's nothing you can add to it. Super 7 did a decent job of adding some new to it with while they had the licensing and they added some new figures. But even then, they looked more like knockoffs than actual Motu figures with their add-ons that they did to it. But really, it's, we can explore new things. We're getting figures we never had now. We had Koldar already, who was one of my most favorite figures from Origins. Frogmonger's on the way, and I'm feeling very, very cool about that being original. We've got Sunman back in the line, who, again, it was a vintage toy that they're renewing. So, I mean, sometimes you just can't get vintage of other things. But that's not to say there isn't vintage that you cannot get modern versions of. And a big one that we were talking about right before coming live is Visionaries. You have one choice. You can only go back to vintage.
That literally was going to lend into the next part that I wanted to talk about here is that a lot of the modern lines are the popular stuff. Do we really get anything for vintage Visionaries? Which, oh my God, those cartoons are so good. Yeah, and I have my theories as to why it never took off. And Adam, before we jumped on, you said partly because there was so much to collect. To me, it was also like if you're a kid and everyone's kind of dressed in the same uniform and their names are not very kid-oriented, like how is Kryvak different from Sindar if you're a Visionaries guy? But in Masters of the Universe, Panther is a cat. You know what I mean? Cyclone literally spins. Manny Faces twists his face around, right? And
but you have a giant G.I. Joe collection, which was a bunch of different soldiers with different code names. So, like, there was a lot of names to remember as a kid when you're looking at.
There was, but they looked different enough. They weren't all dressed in the same uniform with different colors like Visionaries was. That was always my theory and why Visionaries didn't take off.
Have you seen the first 12 G.I. Joes, Ken?
Yeah, okay, fine. But different weapons, though. They didn't all carry the same staff, right? Like different weapons. Okay, sorry, we're going in circles here, but you're right about that first year, because if that first year hadn't taken off, we'd be talking about G.I. Joe in the same context as Visionaries right now. Everyone's OD military green except for Scarlet and Snake Eyes, right? Oh wait, the Cobras as well, but so like,
Snake Eyes is the perfect example of a toy company throwing together something so cheaply. They're like, we're going to make a figure with not a lot of detail. We're not even going to paint them, and boom. And somehow that was the most popular character, because every wave after that pretty much came out with a version of Snake Eyes. I don't know how Hasbro did it, but they were like, we're going to go sell a prototype toy, and
magic.
People are going to love it.
Magic. And like, other than like, okay, G.I. Joe obviously took off, even though it's wavered a bit, but when it takes off, it takes off. When it's dead, it's dead. Now, things like Visionaries, Mask, Cops, Brave Star, Adam, you're a Sectars guy.
Love Sectars.
That stuff didn't take off to the same level, and you only have a choice of vintage. And because we haven't had the modern line, Silverhawks is recently just about to get a modern line, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, go on.
Sectars has a modern line coming out, and they also had the Zevek toys come out. Like they did that line of the 3 3/4 inch Sectars a while ago, which I had, and I would say that the fan base just had no interest in. They were so far removed from what we knew and loved, and to me, and ever since I had that 8 years ago revelation moment with Superman, I see modern stuff come out. I'm like, that's great, I'm good. But for every line I see that's a remake or a reissue, I just think like, oh, that could have been something new. That could have been a new idea out there, and that's that's right where I'm at right now. But I remove myself from like this idea or the conversation. I really don't have anything to add to like, what about the ones that you can only get vintage of? Because in my mind, I'm only collecting vintage. I don't want to see a reissue of Cops, because I know what the Cops are. Do something different, Hasbro.
Yeah, and I've always respected that you can kind of stick to your guns on that. They could show you the greatest modern figure in the world. They could come up with this like fully articulated Brave Star with blast effects and a cool box that's retro throwback style. Make him, a 2-pack with Tex-Hex, and you'll be like, I have my Brave Star. I have my Tex-Hex. Have a good one, right? I've always like respected the resolve to stay in that lane, because it's hard to stay in that lane. I can't stay in that lane. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's really tough. I look at what's coming out with toys, and I enjoy some of these modern upgrades that they've done. And I say upgrades only in the fact of, again, original
articulation
did not have the articulation. And some of the new tooling that they've figured out how to do articulation now just wasn't really possible back then in a way that your figure would be able to stand on its own still.
I want to throw this out there, and I've said this a couple times, but I think that articulation was never a concern of ours as a kid, because you'd have like Motu, and they had the weird legs and limited articulation, or you'd have Thundercats, which had like 5 points and the arms were kind of set to do that. But we also had LJN wrestlers that didn't move at all. It was just a dog toy. And we loved them, right? We had when the Hasbro wrestlers came out, we're like, it wasn't like, oh, now they move. It was like, oh, these are just more toys to play with, and they were, stuck like this sometimes, and we made it work. I think the high articulation comes from the adult collectors griping, and then the companies responding like, oh, give them more articulation, to the point for a while those Toy Biz figures wouldn't even stand up because they were so articulated. And I think that we often trade articulation for charm.
You know what? You're right. Like some of the Toy Biz Marvel Legends figures in the 2000s, I couldn't get some of them to stand because they have so much articulation. And I'm like, if the ankle joint wasn't so loose, like good luck getting your Toy Biz Mystique from Marvel Legends in the 2000s to stand. I couldn't, right?
Yeah.
They had to make the feet smaller, right? So she couldn't wear big clown shoes because it would look disproportionate. But all the articulation made her a bit janky or wonky, I should say. Yeah. So
It's totally a price you pay. Absolutely. Because again, G.I. Joe 3.75, like, you know, I had some of the ones from the 80s where by like the mid 90s, I couldn't stand them up without the base anymore. They were well loved. But then you get, you know, Star Wars, you know, Luke Skywalker from 1977, Farm Boy Skywalker. He was going to stand on his own no matter what, because he was very solid, very stiff, only had 5-point articulate. Well, even I think it was only 4-point. I don't think he could turn his head really. But you know, it's just one of those things. Like sometimes is it going to be that more stability that you look for, or something that you like playing with? I know as a kid, I did kind of wish that my Masters Universe, I did have a little bit more with the arms because of the holding the sword aloft. And we only just recently got really good wrist articulation, and even then it's still limited with the 40th anniversary He-Man, but he can finally hold his sword aloft, and I think that's great. But again, it's not gonna matter as much to somebody who didn't have that as a kid.
And also, it's the question you're asking now is like, what He-Man do I buy to get the one that can hold the sword aloft? Whereas when we were kids, it's like, I want a He-Man. This is it. There's no options. It's like, this is He-Man. You love it or you hate it for what it is. This is Lion-O. Love it or hate it for what it is. And I think that we bought into it, and we would cross play with our different scales and articulation. And that was fine. Like that was, you know, I used to use Ren from Pirates of Dark Water as the Rocket Owen Hart when he used to be in his blue gear in my Hasbro ring. And we were just okay with it because those were our toys. We were playing with them. And it wasn't like, we weren't so picky. Adult collectors are so picky, and we're so critical of stuff because it's not exactly what we want, as opposed to just saying like, this is perfect in its imperfection.
And you know what? It's funny you mentioned that, not having choices. For those who watch the Young Rock television series, he does the flashback to 1983, and he says, what did he ask for Christmas? He circled in the catalog for his mother and his grandmother, Skeletor. That's all he wanted. He wanted Skeletor. Didn't have choices at the time. Didn't sit there and say, well, you know, it's the half boot version, or the knees don't move, or whatever. He's going to stand bull-legged. I remember what it was like having a He-Man figure in the 80s. You were just happy to get Skeletor. You know, you didn't care that his head was squishy and all that stuff. And you're right. It goes back to the word charm. And we've seen a few people say it in the chat. Charm. There's an innocence associated with that back then that you would never get away with today. If a new company tried to come in and they weren't just doing retro and they just wanted to be like, oh, let's just make these like blocky figures that are a little bit awkward, you know, they would get shellacked by the toy collecting community. Why are you making that, you cheapos? So now they got to get paint. They got to get articulation. They got to get a ton of extra accessories. They got to have good packaging that 3/4 of us aren't going to keep.
But can you hit on the head? What the problem is, you hit it on the head. You said if they came out with chunky, stylized figures, the toy collecting community would crap on them. Who cares about the toy collecting community? They should make them for kids. We will collect them anyways.
Okay.
True.
Full stop, mic drop. That's actually a very good point. That's why I like having you on these streams. You won't just parrot what I say. Yeah, Ken. Yeah, Ken. You'll be like, no, Ken, take this and make the point over here. Like, open my mind up.
Like it or not, after Michael French made the excellent video about the final faction figures, people all throughout the community went out and bought 5-point of articulation, poorly painted figures from the Dollar Tree because they were new and they were fun and they were cheap. No one complained about it, right? It was something new. We want to collect. We want to collect new things. I just don't need 20 new He-Mans because I have my He-Man. Right. And that being said, I'll buy 20 janky old He-Mans and fix them up and like give them away or have them to the collection or make customs. And, you know, Oz, when you said that they're not making any more of the vintage line, my favorite thing to do is to expand vintage lines and making customs that would fit into the vintage line. Like that's my absolute favorite thing to do.
Yes.
And that's how you can do it. But I don't need the 40th anniversary Masterverse He-Man because I have the 1981 He-Man, and that's what we need. I want Mattel to come out with, something new, Max Ray 11, like some new thing that is geared towards kids, that engages kids, and that we are going to collect anyways.
The CGI show.
Whatever. It doesn't matter what it is.
That's what they've got, the CGI show targeted to kids right now, and some toys over there. It's a little different. It's actually quite different. And I look at it, and my first thought is not my He-Man, but if they enjoy it, let's preserve the franchise.
But the issue with that is you walk into Walmart now, or Toys R Us if you're in Canada, and you have 4 different He-Mans to pick from. So when your son says to grandma, I want He-Man for Christmas, what do they do? Right?
Well,
okay.
Had that instance. So last year, not this past, but last year, Connor started playing, of course, with my He-Man toys. And he went back home and he was telling his mom he was playing with He-Man. And Santa Claus brought him Revelations He-Man and Skeletor. And I just kind of looked at it like, of all the versions that Santa could have brought, why did Santa bring the more expensive collector's version for the, at the time, 6-year-old kid?
Yeah.
Turn around, Santa dropped him off He-Man and Skeletor over here from the CGI because, again, it's geared towards the kid. It's got the punching action, all the stuff that I loved as a kid, and it was geared towards that. And he took that home. I have no idea now what conditioner those are in. I heard something about a dog chewing them up. This year, Santa Claus brought him Origins He-Man, Origins Skeletor, Origins Battle Cat, Origins Panther. So, it's really tricky on what is the better version to buy. And you have, of course, the grandma or grandpa, or in my case, you have Santa Claus dropping off maybe not the best version for the child. It's about trying to stay in the know a little bit with that. But for some people, that's hard because they have no interest in it. It's easy for me to say, this is what you should get, for this, because I'm in the know. I'm in the community kind of thing. Not all adults are. Let's face it, So it's really tough to say what kids are getting into these days. And most kids these days really just get into screen time. So with that being said, comes along something that's not even modern, but still going into the future. And it kind of started with stuff like bridging the electronic with the action figure. And that was with games like Skylanders, Disney Infinity, Lego Dimensions, where you buy these toys and kids got to have these toys. And I got to admit, because I'm a collector, when that first one came out, I was all about it. And I had to get every single one and all the little sets. But it brought them to life in a game. And it was a way to bridge that toy with that game. And you saw a surge of toy buying that I hadn't seen in a long time.
My kids got really into Disney Infinity. Huge. It was great.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think, the best thing we can do as toy collectors to make the hobby continue isn't demand more Snake Eyes and more He-Man, but play with our kids. Get our kids on the floor, get them playing with toys, raise them to be people that are creative and active, not passive players, and then the toy community will continue and toy demand will be there.
Right. It's up to us as parents, as we have our kids, and I talk about sharing the passion with my son, as he has now said he wants to be a toy collector. And it's like, well, why don't you be a toy player? Let's play with the toys. There's plenty of time for them to look pretty on the shelf. But, having the problems I had were my original toys from being a kid, they went up in a house fire. So I didn't have any of that to share with my son when he was born. And so we've had to go back and revisit some of the things that I had fun with as a kid and rebuying certain ones from then. Kind of an example of the modern versus vintage. So my son happened to walk in while I was watching the new Predator movie a few years back, and he sat down and he started watching. I was like, "You're not scared?" He goes, "No, Dad, it's just a movie." And I was like, "Okay, I'm not sure this is the movie I want you to watch, but if it gets too scary, we'll turn it off." Because I was young when I first saw Alien and Predator as a kid, and it completely.
We were from the generation who edited for TV movies. We could watch anything.
Right. So he sat down and he started watching it, and then kind of went with that, and he was looking at my NECA Alien and Predators, and he was like, "I want to play with these," and I was like, "Yeah, no, you don't." You know, Daddy spent way too much money on those for you to play with those. Those can't really be played with that way, because we all know how those joints could be. One wrong move and boom, there goes a leg.
NECA statues.
Yeah. So I actually took the time and hunted down the entire vintage Alien and Predator Kenner line. Fantastic. So that we could play.
Yeah.
Because
that's passion.
Those ones you can play with.
And I feel like that was like Kenner's last great toy line.
Yeah, right before they got bought up. Absolutely. I kind of agree with you there, because it was right around that time they were getting the Hasbro purchase treatment. And man, that was a really fun, interesting toy line that probably should have never happened. But it did, and I'm glad it did.
It was great. Ken, I hate to be this guy, but I need to head out because we're heading to a party.
No problem.
But Oz, it was great hanging out with you. Ken, it was great as always. And everybody in the chat, thanks for being here. And have a happy new year, everyone.
Happy New Year, Adam. I'm sure we'll be in touch very shortly, like we always are. Absolutely. We talk like a few times a week anyway, so it's all good. Right. Thanks, Adam. Appreciate your time. Yeah. And Oz, before we jump, we continue with that. I just want to say, Articulated Chad, thank you for the super chat. Says here, sorry I'm late. Awesome conversation so far. And check out, Chad just did a top 10 countdown list for 2022 for his figures on his channel. So go check him out and his amazingly awesome and often hilarious car rants. And he was just on Jay Bartlett's channel last night, I think, doing a thing.
Yeah, it's all. Jay posted that today. I saw it on Facebook. I noticed it popped up when I was scrolling. So I will definitely go check out your channel, Chad, and see that top 10.
Yes, absolutely. And this is one where I know me and Chad generally don't agree on the G.I. Joe classified line. Although, no, that's not true. I agree with him about the lack of world building you can get from the classified line. I just like that line more than he does. But he has here, we got G.I. Joe Extreme, and he wasn't a fan, and neither was I. I did not like a G.I. Joe Extreme one bit. I mean, sometimes if they were to do like a callback or a throwback to G.I. Joe Extreme, like through like an O-ring rebirth or something like that, I could stomach that. But G.I. Joe Extreme, when I was watching it in the 90s, I was like, G.I. Joe is dead. I'm going back to Power Rangers right now.
Right. No, I had that same moment too, where I was like, G.I. Joe Extreme, let me check that out. And watched the cartoon, saw the toys, and I was just like, ew. Why is my G.I. Joe like this? I can't do anything with this.
Absolutely.
So I was definitely glad to see them go back to the O-ring, like 3.75 style afterwards. And, you know, it's funny. I actually got into G.I. Joe briefly with Sigma 6.
Okay. Yeah.
The packaging for Sigma 6 sold me. Like this, you know, it came into that 2-part Foot Locker type thing. And I thought that was great because they did have all these different accessories and stuff. And you could compartmentalize all that into their Foot Lockers after you opened them up. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was neat. I know Sigma 6 was not for everybody, but that was a really, it was interesting and different to me at the time from everything else.
I lost interest in any G.I. Joe lore. I mean, so I should say cartoons, because I still would get the comics. But until Resolute, G.I. Joe Resolute came out. That to me was great, you know. And I had a brief time with the 25th/50th anniversary line, brief. But yeah, man, where was I going with that? I wasn't going anywhere with that. It's full stop, full end thought right there. Though, I mean, we've been going at it for about 75 minutes here, but have you, and I know you've told some great stories here, and so has Adam, but Is there something on your vintage want list heading into 2023? I know. I wasn't ready to. Yeah, loaded.
You know what? Yes, there is. And they just had them not too long ago. The real Ghostbusters vintage that came back out. That was another thing that I had a lot of as a kid with the Firehouse, the Ecto 1, the Ecto 2. And I think I want to dip my toes back into some vintage Ghostbusters.
Okay.
Just because they were pretty fun. So for next year, I might, check that out a little bit. Take my shoes off and dip my toes in the water a little bit.
You know what? Speaking of Kenner, that was one of their best as well, was Ghostbusters. Now, are you thinking about going to like toy shows or online and hunting down actual vintage ones? Or are you thinking like retro style vintage reissues like they gave us recently at Walmart?
Well,
or either or.
It's funny you bring it up. It really depends on what I can find at probably the most reasonable price. Because as the whole point of this episode was, is it worth it to go back to the vintage with the rising cost of the new? So, I mean, right now you can't find those vintage Ghostbusters in a store anymore already. They're gone. Down here in the US, we can find some Ecto 1s in the store here and there because they finally showed up like a year late. But you can't find the Ghostbusters themselves. So I'm really relegated to going to specialty toy shops and toy shows.
That's okay.
But when I go there, what's going to be the cheaper bargain? Is it going to be finding loose complete, or is it going to be finding carded
reissues,
vintage style?
And for a long time, that's how I collected my Transformers. I started as a university student, coming back into it as an adult. Now, my time between stopping collecting as a kid, I still collected stuff as a teenager, but then I started buying stuff with my own money when I was about 20 years old. I bought reissues a lot of the time for Transformers. Over the years, some of those reissues have just become originals again, just like because I go to toy shows, I sometimes buy collections, and I might be like, I'm gonna sell my reissue now and get and keep the original if there was something charming about it. But it's opportunistic. Ultimately, what you're saying is it comes down to what opportunity are you presented with, more so than does it have to be vintage or does it have to be the reissue, right?
Absolutely. Because in my mind, the reissues are just as fun to me, just as good as those vintage are to me.
So there's a couple options for your. I clicked the wrong comment, but yes, Retro Beast Wars are cool. Pre-order on BBT. I think Ian J is saying here that you can actually get the Ghostbusters on BBTS, and Nerdzoic apparently just has a bundle of them. So it's funny. Nerdzoic just messaged me back. I thanked him for putting the award show together, and literally before we jumped on live, I got a response from him saying he's a really busy guy lately, so I was surprised he responded at all. But
I feel that way when I reach out to like you and Jay these days. Like everybody's so busy. We're all over toy YouTube. It's like, am I even going to hear back today?
I'm a tiny channel despite how active I am. So you'll hear back from me. If the day ever comes where messages are too flooded, which I hope that day doesn't come, because it would just be tedious, and then people would start being like, oh, you don't answer me anymore. You would never say that, but I've had, I've seen people say that before. I'm like, well, the guy probably gets 10,000 messages a day. Like cut him some slack, yeah.
Well, that's why, like, if I reach out to, Jay from Geek Dad Life, I don't ever expect to hear a response because he's very busy. He's got his show going on. He's got a lot of other stuff going on.
And I did notice he's gotten even busier, because when I first started talking to him, his channel was maybe 7,000 subscribers. Now he's just broke 15. So like he's more than doubled in the past, year or so. It is like he will respond, but it might take him a bit longer, especially over the holiday season.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Right. So that's just how it is. And the more power to them, because like they've got Toy Geeks tomorrow, and that podcast was one of a few different inspirations for me to do TKO. Right. Like, yeah, I started as a co-host on Sergeant Slaughter Slaughterhouse because he had the StreamYard account and I didn't. And that was the other inspiration. Like, I'm rocking the Slaughterhouse gear right now. But the other one was the Toy Geeks, the weekly Toy Geeks episode, and being like, okay, well, maybe I could give this a go, you know, and take things in a bit of a different direction because, you know, they do a lot of breaking news and stuff that happened in the past week. But if I catered something more like vintage topical, or collecting philosophies that have nothing to do with news. Like if I had wanted to do like a topical news episode, maybe I would have done something like what Mega J Retro did about the Mondo stuff last night and, you know, pull up some images on that. But there's plenty of channels that cover that. So I took this in a bit of a different direction. And even though we went with this topic this week, Oz, I threw other topics at you that I was thinking about doing. And I circled back to this.
Right? That's right. Yeah, that's where you really find like what it is you want to discuss, you know. And I think it's great when we do these collaborations or, you know, when we want to get somebody else's opinion about things like, well, how do you feel about this? And would you be willing to speak your opinion on it? You know, just after this past week's episode of Toy Frenzy on Skelevator's channel, the Dooch and Sean from Legends of Grayskull podcast actually approached me and Skelly on Facebook, and they were like, hey, you know, we had a blast on your show this week, and here's this topic we've had on the table that we briefly touched on tonight. What would you guys think about trying to come over to our channel and talk about that? And it was like, let's do it, you know.
You know, sometimes these collaborations come up in that way. Like I've had Wes from Fandom Power podcast on here before, and we've always talked. Like I've known him since before I was on YouTube, and you know, and he recently did some voice work for me, and actually some on-camera work when we did a history of Transformers 1985 video that I'm going to release in January. And I had so much fun talking to him. He showed the preview of the video to his co-host of Fandom Power, and I'm like, why don't I get all three of you on at some point in time, and we'll find a topic that we can all do that. Yeah, I like this right here. A G.I. Joe figure from the 80s is easier to find than a figure today, and in so many cases, and usually cheaper. It's become that way, hasn't it? Yeah. Right. As proud as I am of my Serpentor Air Chariot that a lot of people classified Serpentor Air Chariot figure of the year, I happened to be at my phone. I was at a toy show when I ordered that, and Hasbro Pulse had the glitch where if you add it to cart, I don't know if you heard about this, like it would say that it's only available for premium members for the first hour, but if you added it to cart, it would work. And I was at the toy show in a bit of a lull, and my buddy Steve sitting next to me, he goes, oh, it worked. I managed to add it to cart without a Pulse membership, and I added mine to cart. And then it worked. Now, if I hadn't gotten that, would I be resenting not getting that figure? I would be. I love it now that I have it. But what about all the people that missed out on it?
After watching all the videos of how great that figure is, and I remembered what it was like having that figure as a kid, because again, I'm a huge fan of snakes and reptiles. So
I'm not.
Me, I loved Serpentor. To me, he was just like the coolest thing outside of King Hiss and the Snake Men in a lot of ways.
Yes.
And so like when I saw him coming, I was like, ooh, I'd like to get that, but I'm staying in my lane. You know, I'm not collecting outside of Origins right now. And I'm kind of sad that I missed out because he is such an amazing figure. And even if I don't collect anything else in Classified, except for Crocmaster, because I need Fiona and her babies, it'd be a great centerpiece, something to talk about. It'd be better if I could get Mindbender and Serpentor,
and both exclusives, which is once you get them, there's a feeling of, oh, thank God. But there's also that feeling of I almost didn't, because Mindbender and Serpentor were both exclusives. And it's like, okay, it's great to have them. They look good. But why is distribution that way? And that's how we started this conversation an hour ago, right?
Yeah, it is. Right back to Wondar and...
Right. And yeah, Wondar and Koldar were very much like the Mindbender and Serpentor of the Classified. Like for Origins, that's what they were. And even this Camo Con, like, yeah, Space Sumo, like you said, a lot of people don't want them. But it's like, why are they doing it that way? And does it just make you just want to look back at your vintage and be like, I didn't have this problem 30 years ago?
Nope.
Right? Or longer ago, right?
Well, I didn't have any of the problems because I wasn't buying them back then either. It was my parents' problem.
Well, there you go. You
I
made
was
a
just
list.
happy with what I got.
That's right. Now it's funny because, like, as adults, the philosophy is we now have more control because we don't have to ask somebody to buy this stuff for us, generally speaking. But then that control gets taken away with inconsistent distribution. I say inconsistent because some figures are easy to get and some figures are just frustratingly impossible to get, right? Like,
that's right.
You know, I know something that's a limited run. I'm not hating on it. Like, people keep mentioning Mythic Legions. I was not around my device at the time that the Four Horsemen, the Headless Horseman came out. I know Mythic Legions is a passion company. They'll probably make a different version of it that I'll end up getting. So I'm not as worried. The big companies, I'm not sure they're going to do that, or if they're just going to lord it over us like, yeah, we don't have it, you know. With Transformers and its consistent legacy brand, you'll probably get the figure you want at some point. Might take 2 years, but they'll probably get to it. Origins for Mattel, classified for G.I. Joe, I don't know that we're going to get it because they're relatively new. We don't know how long those lines are going to stick around, but I've got a vintage line to go back to if I ever want it again. So
that's right.
Yeah,
Ryan, if I don't
Ryan,
get a Fright Zone or I don't get a Slime pick, because after Eternia and the announcement of Snake Mountain coming, a lot of fans in the Motu want Fright Zone. They want Slime Pit. The best part about it is if we don't get it with Origins, you have a vintage to go back to, and that's okay.
Yes, and there's nothing wrong with that. Ryan makes a good point here that new toys, actually, he is. Something's popular, it sells out. Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow had this in the 80s. You know what? Because I didn't get into G.I. Joe until the second version of Storm Shadow, maybe I didn't have this issue in 84, 85. When you're talking about the Snake Eyes and Timber, or the first Storm Shadow. So, you know what? That is true, too. I know when I wanted Ninja Turtles, I was able to get all four. Don't know how that happened. Maybe distribution was okay in Canada, even though the Toys That Made Us specifically said no turtle on the shelf a couple of times in their Toys That Made Us episode. Because Playmates was not equipped. I've changed the subject here from G.I. Joe to Ninja Turtles. Very not so subtly, like I've kind of sharply left turned. We need Adam here to call me on that. But Playmates was not equipped to handle the quantities that the bigger companies were. But he's right too. Like, popular characters can sell out even back in the 80s. I think Kirk Bazigian held out a chart at JoeCon one of those years that showed they made more of them back then, though. Like, there were way bigger quantities of toys back in the day. And you see it even not just with Hasbro, with Kenner Star Wars. Nothing's really rare for before you get to the Power of the Force stuff. Anyway, I've meandered again. I've gone from G.I. Joe to Turtles to Star Wars to Transformers and back. Well, hopefully the bouncing ball hasn't been too confusing here. So
it hasn't been too much because the overall topic that we're talking about is that distribution and these different lines and how they distribute. You know, with that, most of those lines are Kenner lines, but then like with Playmates, they were a big boy in the 90s and they still have a presence out there today.
They do.
But, again, it's Hasbro gets a whole aisle in the toy department. Playmates, you're not going to see something like that anymore. But back in the day, yes, they made a lot. They were selling to kids. And I brought it up a couple times. And Ryan Dole said it perfectly. Like, we have been programmed from being a child watching half-hour toy commercials. And they know they've got us. They trained us themselves for this eventuality. Maybe not knowingly.
I was gonna say probably not intentionally, but they got us.
They didn't have the forethought for 40-year-olds buying these things still.
Yes.
But they wanted to program us at the time to be like, Mommy, Daddy, we want you to go spend your money on buying these toys at the toy aisle.
I mean, they were also $3.99 back then.
That's true, but minimum wage back then was like $5 an hour, so you were still looking at almost an hour's worth of work for.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. People had more kids back then. There were a lot more families of threes, and there's a lot more only childs and 2-kid families.
Right, right. So there was this plan of theirs and getting these toys out, and they knew people were going to buy them, and they knew kids were rough. and that especially us boys, God, you know, I'm surprised any of our toys actually made it out of the 80s still complete. And, you know, so they wanted to make these toys, and then people are going to rebuy them because they're going to break. And that's fine that there was a lot of them. I don't think now in today's market, if they put out the numbers that they put out back then, that we would see as many sales as we do. Like, you know,
no,
like
no, we wouldn't. We wouldn't.
sales numbers.
It's a known fact that the quantities have gone way down on
Right.
toys. Like somebody had said something like that for Snow Serpents alone, there was like 1 million made or something along those lines. I totally forget, and I can't base that number back on fact. But I don't think they're making 1 million of quantities, right? Sometimes you see limited edition one of whatever 10,000 or something, but even a regular quantity would not be anywhere near 1 million. Like it wouldn't even be 500,000. I don't think. I'd be surprised if it's 100,000 in certain cases.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, I don't believe in any way, shape, or form that, like, I mean, with the exception of maybe Mini Comic Stratos and Jitsu, that there's like 100,000 of any one character from Masters of the Universe out there. But yeah, he knew how to take care of his toys because he still has a working Eternia with the most robust track that any collector of that place.
Which is funny. On that episode of Toy Anxiety, I made a joke. Like they said, "Hey, what year would you like to go back to?" And that chat flies really quickly. Sometimes you get 200 people in the chat, and I very subtly wrote, not so subtly wrote, 1987. Go back to that year, break Bill's Eternia track, and come back. And he noticed the comment. He's like, "Look at this mofo right here! Can you break my Eternia track?" And I just laughed my ass off, just knowing that like he really puts a lot on that Eternia.
He does, and I tease him for it whenever I can when he comes on like Toy Frenzy and all. Like, you know, just you know, whenever I can bring up the fact that he has the most robust and strongest Eternia ever made. So yeah, right there, Ryan phrased it perfectly. Minimum wage in 1990 in the U.S. was $3.85, and you're right.
There you go.
I had as of a few years ago, I had a vintage Tila still mint on card. The blister was yellowing, but it still had the sticker on it from Kitty City, which was a toy store that got discontinued here in the 90s. And it said $2.99 for a figure. That was an hour's worth of work for that figure. Much like how now we look at Marvel Legends at $25, and most people aren't making $25 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's a big disparity with looking at how much a figure costs versus how many hours worth of work do you have to go to get that one.
And everything else is going up in price. So it's like,
right.
You know, I mean, like I said, like at this point, you can buy like a mid-end vintage figure now for that price, and it gives you sort of like that nostalgic kick, that nostalgic high.
That's right. You got that memory attached to it because it is what you had when you were a kid.
Absolutely.
Like I got Cobra Khan here, and I used to terrorize my sister and everybody else playing with them and squirting people. And my new one, the Camo Con that we just opened up on Toy Frenzy.
Yep.
I can't squirt people with that, but I can pull this. Here he is. Pull this vintage one out of the box, go fill them up right now, and you know, I'd spray everybody in the chat.
Right. It's part of the fun. Yeah. So as they say, time flies when you're having fun, and we're around the 90-minute mark here. But is there anything you wanted to plug on your channel that either you've done recently or are about to do coming up there?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, it's New Year's Eve, so I understand if everybody's already going to be spending time with their families and doing that. But Saturday nights at 9:00 is when I do my show, Ozstradamus Toyz Live, and we cover various topics. It's normally me solo. Sometimes I have guests on. But tonight I'm going to be doing a New Year's Eve hangout countdown. So if anybody's free and they want to come on, join in the chat, and who knows, depending on who all is there, I might just throw a public StreamYard link out to anybody and see if you want to jump in. Oh man, I see Jay has made it. All
right. Cool. We'll get him to come in, vamp for a little bit, and say before we say a farewell here. But like, 6 p.m. I'm usually at my time. That's when we take my son to go see grandma, grandpa. So a lot of times I'll play it in the background. Hey Oz, bye.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you've totally jumped in and said what's up, and then I get it. We're all busy. We got stuff.
Yeah, especially on Saturdays.
Sure.
Most Saturdays, not every Saturday is like that, but there's a bunch of Saturdays. Say 3 out of 4 Saturdays I'm like that.
So there's that. And then, of course, every Thursday night at 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific, Toy Frenzy on Skelevator's channel. And, oh gosh, I forget. I'm on so many shows now. The Power of Eternia podcast, we're going to be doing our next episode of that coming up in a few weeks. And that's myself, Bobby Vintage Motu, and Adam from the Battle Ram blog. So any of you Motu fans that visit his site, where I've gotten quite a lot of my information from over the years. We definitely have that coming down the line. And Brick brings it up as well, Legion's class. Next episode of Legion's class is going to be Saturday the 14th. And if that's the show to watch if you're a little leery about getting into Mythic Legions, and then we sell it to you like almost for a whole episode.
Do you go on about explaining the individual factions as well? Because I love to do an episode on that. So
go back and catch the last episode we did. I've got it on my channel in a playlist. It's a 4-hour episode, so be prepared for the ride. You'll probably have to break it up, but that's what we're doing. We're going through the myth and the lore. Like the very first Mythic Legions class that we did. The very first episode we did was just talking about why it's not really so scary as everybody thinks to get involved with Mythic Legions. Okay. And then we went through factions and races.
Where's the lore usually explained other than the file cards than the cards and on the on the Four Horsemen site? Is there any other place where the lore is explained?
Jesse goes over it on his channel, Just Shelve It. He's talked about it quite a bit. He does like Mythic Minutes.
But are there books out there that explain the lore?
Books are coming from what we've heard.
Okay, because I know there's the game too, War of the Etherblade.
Yeah, that's coming out too, which again, amazing. Absolutely amazing. Don't give me Crypt Toys. Don't give me that stuff. Give me these games like this. We're gonna get a Mythic Legions game. Why would I want to buy a Crypt Toy when I could buy a Mythic Legions game?
Right.
But I totally get what Brick's saying right there. We should re-edit that down as Cliff Notes version. I agree.
Or you could probably, if you did it on StreamYard, you could probably just clip show it.
Well, right? Yeah, and that's the thing. You
can just download it, clip it.
I've got it downloaded right now, so maybe I'll talk to Brick. Brick, we'll talk, and we'll see about what we can do about editing that down into an actual just a video format. So that way it'll make it a little easier to digest with less offshoots and tangents and other stuff as we do.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure if Mega J is going to make it. We're kind of coming towards the end of the show here, but let's if he makes it in the next minute or so, we can get him to say a quick Happy New Year to everybody. But if I don't see him in the back end of StreamYard yet. For Toy Connections in the coming week, I'm showing up for some of the shorter videos, because I can't do long videos every single time. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll do like a shorter video. Oh, Mega J's here. So I'll do a G.I. Joe Classified custom video next week, and then I'll do a longer Transformers video the week after. And happy holidays. He made it. I'm so happy to see you, buddy.
Mega J.
Mega J.
I was looking for the for the Happy New Year hat. And they're nowhere to be found. But anyway, Happy New Year, everybody. Well, a few hours from now, some of us have reached there. Some of us, like Australia, hit it in about, I think, like 4 hours ago or something like
Australia, New Zealand, parts of Asia. All right, cool. Yeah. Mega J, you can freestyle while I use the restroom for a few minutes, and we'll keep the stream going for a little bit longer today.
Use the restroom. Go for it.
All right. Cool.
Jay,
what's up, everybody? Oz, happy New Year's Eve. Happy New Year's Eve. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, buddy. Definitely.
I can see the sunlight beaming down from the coffin. It's like
it's so weird to actually see me with daylight around me.
Yeah, daylight. It's the vampire in us, like when remember when I was in college, like I lived in the basement, my mom's basement, and every night every day I had to walk up the stairs.
Absolutely.
That's just crazy.
Well,
so you guys have been chatting, and I've been, I came at the end. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry. I have to apologize. I was streaming last night until like God knows when, as you know, Oz. Right?
Yeah. I was trying to make it, man. I was fighting. I downed a cup of coffee. And as I was sitting here in my chair, I just kind of started to go, because, I was doing some channel work stuff for myself while I was waiting for you to go live. And as I was sitting here, I was catching myself doing one of these. And I was like, nope, I'm not going to be able to make it tonight. I'm working and I work 8:30 a.m. to 5. And after doing that all week, I just get a little bit more tired. Some weeks I have it in me, some weeks I don't.
You know what? We're not young anymore, Oz. We're not young anymore. And it's 2023. Things are like coming fast and furious at us. But how is everybody? Are you guys doing okay? Like what are you? Oz? Let's ask you this because I wanted to ask you this last night. What was your favorite memory of 2022? Like what were some of the things that really came to you?
I'll give it up as a little bit of a spoiler because that was something I was going to discuss when I go live later tonight, because I'm going to be doing a countdown to midnight stream starting at 9 p.m. our time Eastern, and I was going to discuss about like some of my favorite memories of 2022, and I gotta say, I think my most fond memory of 2022 is getting more involved with this community, going live with you guys and stuff, starting the show with Skelevator, doing Toy Frenzy, starting up my own channel, Jay being on your channel, going from like the last couple of years of watching your channel, getting involved in the chats on your live stream, and then to go live with you. And same with you, Ken, too. As a matter of fact, like watching you live, getting involved in the chat, and then now here I am going live with you guys. These are like my favorite memories of the year. Not so much the toys that I've bought, but talking about these toys and getting involved into this amazing community and meeting so many like-minded and fellow positive collectors. There's not on any of our channels are we ever like, oh, they need to do this or they need to do that, like you get with some channels. It's all with us. It's like, guys, look at what they're doing. Isn't this awesome? Yeah. Like, this is amazing. We're seeing this. And, those are my fond memories of 2022.
That's awesome. How about you, Ken? What was your if you have one, fond memory of 2022?
I'm walking down the stairs, leaving my friend's place, carrying a box of toys that we did some trading, buying, and I almost rolled my ankle. I stepped on the edge of a step that was not properly furnished, and then I cursed like not a big cursor. I put the box down very gently, and then I roll on the floor. That was about 3 weeks ago. Oh, so did you say fond memories or just memories in general?
I guess that would be the most memorable memory of 20.
That was about 2 weeks ago, and the guy's actually a channel member. Love you, Sterling. We had a great trade at his house. I guess that was a way to give the guy a bit of a shout out.
So that's good. That's good.
Did you share your memory yet, Mega J?
My memory? Honestly, I have so many. There are just so many great memories. But if I really did have to have one in mind, you know what I mean? It would be the well, I can't top this, honestly. Being able to hit a milestone this year, at 10,000 subscribers. That was the biggest thing. Just huge. You know what I mean? Like that to me was, and you guys aren't that far away. Like I know that sounds I don't mean to make that sound condescending or anything, but you're not. You guys are on the track. You guys are there. Like here's the truth. You know what I mean? And you guys have to understand this. It took me and think about this. It took me 4.5 years to hit 1,000 subscribers. Think about that. Right? I mean, Ken, you're well on your way. Oz, you're almost there too, man. Like just to get monetization, that's the biggest thing, right? After that, things really jump, right? And you know what? just keep going. Like, and for anybody out there, for all you guys out there, you know, who are looking for any goal, forget about YouTube, forget about everything else. You know, if you want to succeed, do not give up. That's the biggest thing. You know, like get better at what you're doing, you know, and be consistent. That's the biggest thing I can offer anybody for advice. Just be consistent, you know. And for everybody out there who is thinking about, you know, starting a channel here, do like experiment. Feel free to experiment. Do a couple things, you know, whatever it is, but make sure you're passionate about it, you know, because if you're not passionate about this thing, A, it's going to be hard because you don't like what you're making, right? B, it's going to be you know, evident that you don't like what you're doing, right? And C, it's not gonna last. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Be passionate about what you're doing, right? Like, make sure it is what you want to do here, and then be consistent. Like, if you're gonna say you're gonna do a video a week, do a video a week. If you're gonna say you're gonna do a video a month, do a video a month. Do not. That was my biggest problem. I would do a video a week, then all of a sudden I leave for like 3 weeks, and then all of a sudden do another video. Yeah, that's not gonna work. It's not gonna happen. Right. Yeah. You just
that's one of the reasons that I film stuff in advance. Sometimes, like, I'll film something and then I won't put it up on the channel for like a month in case I run into a busy stretch, right? And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, but I got something ready to go later on. Now the patrons of the channels know, and even, you know, channel members, if they asked as well, if they're like, I know you made a video on this, can I see it early? I'd probably give it to them early. Now for Patreon, I give early access anyway, but I usually do it a few days ahead. But if somebody wanted access like a month ahead, I would do it. That's not a plug, but that's the whole point is, if you're not sure if you're going to have time to do a video a week or a video every 2 weeks, the point being is have that extra video ready to go and make sure it's something passionate so it doesn't look like you just mailed it in or phoned it in. You know, if it's a 4-minute video of you just talking about a toy you like, have that ready to go. Right.
Yeah.
I know if it's topical and it's in the moment, then you got to release it quickly. Right.
Yeah,
that's different. Right. Like the Mondo QC stuff from last night. Jay. Right.
Well, funny you should mention that. It is topical, but it's not timely. I mean, like, it's weird with videos like that. Like, I thought, to be honest with you, that would be spreading like wildfire. But the truth is, nobody was really talking about it. And I looked at it and I was like, why is nobody talking about this? Like the reviewers who talked about it while it happened to them, right? They talked about it, right? But nobody was actually directly, you know, speaking onto it. Mm-hmm. And I'm not trying to, and you know, Ken, you and I talked about this the other day. I'm not looking for the negative aspect of that. As a matter of fact, in the video, there was like right away, there was a spin on it, and sorry, not a spin. There was a highlight on it, highlighting the fact that Mondo knows about what's going on.
Well, they sent the email saying they would send replacement heads for the She-Ra.
Yeah,
right.
And my point of the video was that I hope that they double down on that and do the same thing for He-Man, right? Because He-Man, I haven't received mine yet. It's in the mail. Apparently, it's going to be stuck at the border for a little bit.
The Mondo with the waist.
The Mondo. Yeah. I got the notice saying it's in the mail and it's in transit, right? But I don't know when I'm going to receive it. It's probably going to be like the first week of July, whatever, right? But I'm just kidding. But the reality is, customs, man, customs. You know, they play with it, man. You know what I mean? Like they once they get it, they open it, because all my packages are open, right? They'll open it, they'll play with it, they'll pose it. They're probably the ones who are breaking it.
And then giving Mondo the grief. Yeah,
that's right. Then Mondo has to pick up the pieces, right? No, absolutely. I'm being serious for a minute. They definitely are addressing this, and as I said last night's stream with I don't know if anybody caught it with Ray and with
I caught part of it. I was
yeah.
And the public Brian later.
I saw you there.
Right at the very end.
Yeah. It really is. It really is one of those things which is important to highlight, because, you know, Kenzo, Ray, and myself. Kenzo, poor guy. You know what I mean? He just got into Mondo. I'm only getting into Mondo now, right? And this has pretty much killed it for him. He's not he's been all in. He got the He-Man, he got the She-Ra, and he's waiting on Battle Cat, right? And he's got the button nose. He's got the waist peg that's loose. Now his waist peg hasn't popped off completely, but his waist peg is loose. He says like you can't. It doesn't have a snap, right? So It's one of those things. I think he's mistakening it. I don't think there is a snap. I think it's just a boop. I think that's all it is. But some people view that as not being proper, right? But yeah, it's completely turned him off from Mondo.
It can happen, and I'm sorry to hear that, right?
Yeah.
Like with Kenzo and all that.
And that's the problem, right? Because one bad review, right, could really do it for a line. And people have been asking me since, what's going on with the Batman? What's going on with, X-Men? What's going on with all those, subsequent lines? And I'm like, I haven't heard anything yet. And, I'll throw it to you guys, like, really quickly. What do you think? Because this is the first time they've done a made-to-order situation where they had 48 hours to do orders, right? Prior to that, they had a set number of figures. With a set number of figures, it's a small amount. You can check pretty much for QC everywhere. Whereas if you have, and you said it earlier, Oz, did they actually hit 50, 60, 100,000? I doubt that very much, right? But once you get to those numbers, the rate of failures is much, much higher, right? So, like when they went from 15,000 pieces max, like let's just say it that way, right? With these flash sales, because that's what they were literally flash sales, right? And then all of a sudden they say, okay, we're going to give you 2 days, see what happens, and they got up to 30,000, 40,000, however many it sold. That's when the factory is like, oh crap, we got to get these out, and then they start pumping them up. There was also the question, so what do you guys think? Do you think that was a factor? And then I have a follow-up question really quickly, and then we can move from there. But and I'll just put the follow-up question anyway, really quick, so because I know we're short for time. Was the Chinese New Year a big factor? The fact that the Chinese New Year, and this is the problem with the Chinese New Year. They want to get all the orders in for good luck. Good luck doesn't mean good.
I'm struggling with this right now with the Delta 17 line that we're pumping out, the new O-ring line there, and getting things ready for Chinese New Year, getting the tooling and everything set up. Like, okay, we want the steel molds poured and ready to go for Chinese New Year, so when you come back, you can hit the production line. It's tough, and I don't know, right? When it comes to Mondo, I know that wasn't the question you asked, but just so you know, Tommy, who actually sculpted the Mondo Battle Cat, he did show up in your live stream a couple of weeks ago.
Okay.
Mega J, I don't think you knew that. He actually super chatted that night. He sent a $10 super chat. Forgot to tell you, he showed up and was one of the people interviewed on Pixel Dan's channel about the Mondo Battle Cat. So he watches you, just so you know. Cool. The guy who sculpted, or at least one of the sculptors of the Mondo Battle Cat.
That's awesome. And
anyway,
I'm really hoping for good things with Mondo Battle Cat, honestly. That one's not going to fail. I know that for a fact. After everything has happened now, that is not going to fail. That one's going to be 100% top notch. And it's a $500 figure, right? We're not talking small numbers here, right? But Oz, what do you think? Do you think that that Chinese New Year or like I said, volume was really a big factor in this? What are your thoughts?
I can agree with that. Like, because you're kind of seeing it across the board with several different lines. And of course, everybody has these overseas manufacturing plants and everything like that where stuff is getting put together. And they're rushing. They're really rushing right now. Like, Four Horsemen with the Ogre All-Stars that's just coming out, having all kinds of issues, and then the problem with the heads, and now the heads aren't going to be coming until like next year. That's a big issue they're having right now. So, like, you're seeing it kind of across the board, and it's like, well, what could make, what's going to happen? What's going to be at one factor across the board from all of these different manufacturers? And something like that, where it's like this part of the year, this time of the year, as you were saying, they're rushing to get things done. Everybody misses out. And part of it's also too, I think, like, really this year, the toy companies in general have put the pressure on them too. We're seeing waves of figures coming out now that weren't slated until next year.
Under promise, over deliver. So yeah,
right.
Mm-hmm.
So
and I think you're absolutely right because and it's contributing to the degradation and the of their suppliers. I mean, like, everyone's talking about it, right? Dorkside. What happened to Dorkside? Dorkside fell victim to it's speculated that Dorkside fell victim to the influx of pre-orders, right? They could not keep up. You know what I mean? Their overall liquid assets like depleted too quickly, and they just couldn't keep it up, and pretty much they had to just call it quits. Now there's somebody saying, I can't remember who it is, that their physical store is still open for business, which I think is what they're going to do. They're going to transition to their physical store, like sell out all of their in stock products, but their online business right now, because of like unfortunately everybody knows, and all of the YouTubers who've decided to report on it have not done anybody any favors. So yeah, that's what's going to happen, and this is the problem. Not to scare anybody. And of course, this is freaking New Year's of all things. But Ken, check your Walmart app. And this is only applying to Canada for now. But there's a new price hike for Marvel Legends today. So yeah, not good.
I'm looking at my X-Men shelf right now and seeing who I need.
I know.
Buy them quick while they're still down, because
from
now,
for the Canadians anyway, for the Boxing Day sales, check your favorite retailer, because see if they're still on sale. Because right now, unfortunately, is the time to do that. Just a PSA on everybody, right? Because
no, thank you for that, Mega J.
Yeah, and for all of our US friends and family, guys, I don't know what's going on, but this new year, it is going to be a happy new year. Don't get me wrong, okay? This is like I always look at the positive, always, right? But the truth is, and we just have to look at the reality, right? Toy prices are not coming down. This is just the way it is.
I just hope they plateau for a good number of years, and as our own salaries start to go up a tiny bit, I hope 4 years from now the price is still the same, and we all feel. I don't think it's going to stay like that. It's going to be like that, but anyway.
So here's something, but it brings no comfort to Ken. It brings no comfort to anybody who's a Hasbro fan. Hasbro is the one leading the charge. That just seems to be the case. I'm
only a pseudo fan these days, just so you know, for Hasbro. Like, it's like when I get the product on my shelf, I'm happy for that period. But there's things I wish they would, I don't wish they change everything, but I'm kind of like hit or miss with them. When I get my product, I'm happy. Let's leave it that way. And then
yeah, I know. And you know what? Now more than ever, patience is where you're going to win, because they're going to be, and they're doing it to themselves, right? So. And this applies more to the U.S. than it does to Canada, but check your ollies, check your big lots, check everything, because after 6 months, things are gonna like move quickly. And for Canadians, check your winners, right? Check your Marshalls, check all your discount stores, because you'd be surprised what shows up there in as early as 3 to 4 months. It's actually kind of crazy. So yeah, but anyway. Guys, we're talking about like the reality is this has been a good year, and my favorite memories have to do with the channel, just like Oz, just like Ken. But it really is for me being here with this community, guys. You guys are freaking awesome. Like that is to me my biggest, fondest memory, to be able to share all of our memories here.
And I'm going to touch on that as well. Brick says here, Pacencia. I guess that's a Tagalog way of saying "so be it." Too bad. Yeah. So sort of.
It's a slang that's just like whatever.
So be it. Yeah, whatever. Right. And both of you touched on the growth. Like, I didn't think when I started on YouTube I'd be doing anything other than just a few uploads here and there, talk about my thoughts, the live streaming thing, and basically like TKO's become a podcast, basically, right? Which is now I called it the TKO live stream or the TKO podcast. I never expected it to become like this, interacting with the community. I was like, I don't have a regular co-host. Well, I could just go on myself like Mega J does sometimes, or I could guest co-host and bring a guy like Oz or Adam or Brick or somebody on, right? Yeah. Anyway, anything else before we wrap up?
Or you can just drag people in and say, "Hey, Ken, you want to go live in like two seconds?"
And you've done that to me, and I'm like, okay, just let me get some product in my hair. Oh, screw it, I don't want product in my hair today. Let me just jump on, and I've done that for you several times. So
just jump on.
Jay, I'm gonna add your link to the description section of the video. But subscribe to Mega J, subscribe to Ozstradamus, subscribe to GoFigure, subscribe to everyone in here. Brick something, JLS, subscribe to these guys too. Whoever else, Bob Squad, there's so many of these folks here. Duchess, I'm just scrolling up. I might not get to everybody, but like it's you know, like we got a fantastic toy space out there with a lot of content creators and people with some great thoughts out there. All right, let's wrap this up. And this will be the last stream of the year for me, unless I get roped in something later today. But it'll be the last stream on this channel. I will see you all, and Happy New Year to all. Good tidings for 2023. Thanks to everyone who was here today. And we'll wrap things up. Take care.
Happy New
And
Year.
we'll see you all soon. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, folks.
Happy New Year, guys.